Hey, we are in the treehouse. In case you're wondering, if you've been watching this week or you've never seen me before in this space, this is the tree in my treehouse, right? Coming right through the wall, right through the ceiling. It's part of what God wants to do. He wants to move right into our lives and just burst right through them. Had to tie that in. God wants you and I to be under his influence so much so that we recognize his presence is with us and it influences us. When that happens, we said this week, right out of the gate of Jesus, kind of, coming to public ministry and baptism, Jesus shows us how to live under the influence of the Father's love. Then chapter 4, chapter 4, verse 1 goes right into the desert led by the Spirit, and we find out how we can live under the influence of the Spirit's leading. You will find temptation, and temptation will find you. What matters is that God's Spirit, when we're under his influence, leads us through it, leads us out of it, and literally refines our sense of being, our identity, as we are tested. And when you are tested, it's going to refine who you really are. And sometimes when you fail, you discover, oh my gosh, I failed. But in that, you discover that failure is not how God defines me. God doesn't define me by my failures. He defines me by my forgiveness as his child. The third thing we talked about this week was that we come under the learning of the Son when we are disciples. And so in chapter 4, after his temptation, Jesus goes right and has a conversation with a guy named Andrew and Peter, or Simon, and calls them to come be his followers. Come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Jesus did the same thing with every one of his disciples. He called them from where they were into a relationship with him, to come out of that place of doing whatever they're doing under their own influence or under the influence of their father or under the influence of their culture, to come follow him and come under his influence. In Mark chapter 8, there's a beautiful passage where Jesus turns. His followers have been following him for some time, but he was constantly making more room for more followers. He says to the crowd who was following him, he says, if anyone would want to be my disciple, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses life for me and for the gospel will save it. For what good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? Beautiful passage. What's Jesus saying? When he says this, deny self, he's not saying that you don't matter. He's saying you can get yourself in trouble. Why? Because you can be under just your own influence, the influence of yourself. And people that are under just their own influence are self-consumed. They're self-obsessed. They're selfish, and they can self-destruct. And Jesus, when you learn to recognize that the very basis of who you are, if you choose to abandon his invitation, to not accept his invitation, you're gonna find an influence. It's gonna probably be your own influence. Have you ever realized that oftentimes we can be our own worst enemy? And that's what happens when we're just under the influence of self. And so Jesus calls us at the most basic part of our relationship. The entry point of our relationship is that what I'm doing when I begin to engage daily rhythms of following him, what I'm doing is learning how to get out from under the influence of my own compulsions, my own desires, my own woundedness, my own temptations, and get under the influence of Jesus. This is going to be such a wonderful series, such a wonderful process for you and I to actually construct a rule of life that helps us day by day stay under his influence. I'm super stoked that you are watching, that you want to be a part of this. Please stick with us. Pick up The Common Rule by Justin Earley. Start reading that. Start practicing any number of those. And week by week, we will be refining what it looks like for you and I to get out from under whatever is influencing us so we can get under the influence of Jesus. God, please empower us to practice your presence, to stay so well connected to you that we can see and recognize how we can disconnect from the things that clutter our lives, distracting us from your best. Jesus, we let go of the lesser things and take hold of you and the better things. I'll see you this weekend.